Today, I'm joined by Congressman Andy Biggs, running for Arizona's next governor. And Arizona has become one of the most closely watched governor's races in the country. So, Congressman Biggs, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Lee. It's great honor and pleasure to be with you.
You served in Arizona's state house, and we do a lot of work with the state lawmakers because that's really where health freedom, the core of it, kind of the heartbeat of health freedom resides. But most recently, you've spent several years representing Arizona in Washington, D.C. So why leave Congress to run for governor?
Well, I mean, nobody's going to tell you that Congress doesn't have a lot of problems right now, and with its inability to get anything done, I'm a big believer that Arizona's headed in the wrong direction, and that the states are going to save the country. And I believe Arizona is ready to take that step and be a leader again in this country. And so I said, let's go back home. I have the experience there. I know a lot of folks around the state, and I just thought I could make a significant difference here. Whereas in Washington D.C., I mean, we could spend hours here talking about how broken that place is.
Yes, I mean, 2025 and 2026 have been very quiet years in Congress. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of activity. It's hard to get things done. And I have to agree that local control at the state level is what's going to shape the culture in this nation. I think a lot of people were expecting more to get done this year because culturally we're on a brink of seeing something new. Are you sensing that too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like you and I are going to be talking about Maha and that type of thing. If you were involved in, health freedom 30, 40 years ago, like my wife and I kind of have been, it was not, you were considered a nut job. But today, we've seen the empowerment of individuals to make these health choices. And we expected that more from the federal government, but we didn't see it. And in a lot of areas, like I said, we could talk about that. But I do think that the state level is where these changes are going to be. That's where the power of the people really rests. The closer the government is to the people, then more responsive it is to the people as well.
And how have you protected individual healthcare decisions in DC?
Well, I mean, so I've been a big advocate for personal privacy. So whether it's directly related to health or not, is trying to get the government as much as possible out of your life, and religious freedom as well. But I think most of my work really was obvious during the COVID era, because I introduced legislation to stop the mandates. I introduced legislation to stop the mandates on vaccines or wearing masks. And I remember doing outreach and doing a television show, a news show that I won't mention the name because everybody on this would probably know who I'm talking about. And it was a very highly watched show. And the hostess said, "Oh yes, you know, why are you advocating against masks or something like that?" And I said, we got into a little bit of a debate, and I said, I happen to have two meta studies sitting on my desk with more than 100 studies dealing with masks, and masks don't work particularly in this COVID. And then she got mad, and I didn't go back on her show for a while. She didn't want me back, and then she had me back, and things were great. And the next thing you know, I'm talking not about masks this time, but I'm talking about the fraud of the social distancing, like put a hula hoop around you, like that's going to protect. I actually had my podcast. I brought Dr. Bhattacharya, who is now so prominent in the Trump administration, trying to help us fight these things, and Dr. J's good friend. And I brought all these guys, men and women, doctors and who experts, onto my podcast when no one else was even talking to these people. I think that's the fight, and that really got me focused on this new movement, which was why I was so happy that President Trump brought in Bobby Kennedy.
And I also saw your name on the WHO Withdrawal Act, the Defund the UN Act, which
Yeah.
really shows that some people think it's sexy to be internationally relevant, but when it comes right down to it, we want our government local, that the international relevance does not serve the individual family, the heartbeat of our nation. And so I was encouraged to see that you're on board with that too. But absolutely, privacy is one of the biggest linchpins to any freedom, and COVID was certainly that stress test.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it really was, and so we got to protect privacy. Just, I will say one other thing about the international. I'm glad you brought that up. That one of the I'm the only person I know in Congress, as far as I know, that actually represented NGOs at multilateral institutions around the world fighting against so much of this incursion. So that's why I came back and said the UN is hopelessly corrupt. I mean, it is. The WHO is hopelessly corrupt. It is. And so, why are we participating? Why are we giving our taxpayer dollars when they want to come in at the international level? And they really do, Leah. They want to come in from the international level and actually micromanage your family's health.
Absolutely. I mean, I even saw in one of their plans that they have a goal to sniff out every zero dose child. That's a term they use to say a child that has received zero vaccinations and cut that number in half by 2030. So that's, I mean, that's individual based. That's granular. That's not just looking at good public health policy. That's going and hunting down people who are not compliant. So, how would you, as governor, balance protecting public health while also protecting individual liberty?
Well, so I have a whole platform that we've been working on that. So where we're going to focus on making sure that there's health freedom in Arizona. So like this governor has vetoed numerous bills that would actually provide better health choices for kids, for families, whether it's in schools, whether it's in your healthy environment, et cetera. So the way that I would advocate us doing this is we basically would continue to fight, and on the international level, we would not comply with international mandates. Those international mandates have no authority in our state. And as governor, I will make sure that we acknowledge that. But on the other hand, we're going to provide the legislation necessary to actually expand health freedom and choices in Arizona.
I know that this year in Arizona, one of the bills that was vetoed was called the Medical Freedom Act. And that Medical Freedom Act would have made it so that informed consent is the default standard, that no governor or school employer could force any medical decision upon any individual. Would you have supported the Arizona Medical Freedom Act?
Yeah, absolutely. I would have supported it. And it was another. So you're talking about, I want to say it's HR 2020. I can't remember the number. 2042, I think was the number. 2048. That was it. 2048. And then the other one was 2086 on vaccine mandates as well. So you take 2248, take 2086, and those I would definitely have signed. But there are others as well. And I just want to. I think people need to understand the contrast as well between me and the current governor. She did a 2-sentence veto letter. And in her veto letter, she just said, it's concerning that, and I'm reading from it now, it's concerning diseases that were once eliminated are making a comeback in Arizona's playgrounds and classrooms because of dangerous misinformation. And I just want to say, if there was any misinformation that was put out, she managed to communicate misinformation in that single sentence of her veto letter. And that's really what we've been facing with this particular governor. And yeah, those two bills, 2086, 2248, and then the whole a whole suite of bills that should have been signed by her, which were vetoed, I would sign and support those.
If you even look at the nuance of the healthcare workers, they carried an enormous burden during the public emergency for COVID, and many of them were placed in impossible situations when mandates threatened their livelihood and careers and ability to put food on their own tables. So, what responsibility would your administration have to protect healthcare workers' medical freedom?
Well, we would make sure that the law on conscience was actually followed in this state, and I would work with the hopefully a good Republican attorney general coming in as well to make sure that we actually enforce those, and that might require some litigation, right? I mean, we'll pass the law, we'll make sure that it's there, and there is already some laws in place. But if your attorney general is not helping enforce that law, then you're going to see healthcare workers continue to be abused for conscience, like so many were during the COVID cycle. And that was one of the big things that we did is I was writing letters on behalf of healthcare workers to employers saying, hey, you can't, you have no right to do that. But we were fighting with the federal government as well. We're going to make sure that the Arizona standards are strong, and we're going to stand with the healthcare workers who have a right to have conscience.
One thing that we've been hearing across the spectrum, across the country, across party lines is individuals are tired of government and medicine telling them what's best for their families. It's really eroded the trust. And do you think it's possible for us to rebuild trust between what medicine and government are doing and the individual person who needs help?
Yeah, the best way to rebuild trust is actually to give more freedom to individuals and families to make the choices that they want to make. That's and for me, that is the most salient way to rebuild trust, because when you think about it, if you made a choice, and I'll go back to making choices for your kid 20, 30 years ago, saying we don't want to do all these vaccines that are there, that are required, that they're trying to foist on us. And we actually lost a pediatrician who told us, if you're not going to vaccinate your kid, then the way we tell you to, then we're not going to allow them to come into our practice. Well, here's the deal. When you have that attitude, and I don't want to walk too far down this, but if you have big pharma providing what I will just call incentives to do exactly what they want, that will continue to erode trust. But if you have options for families, options for parents, options for individuals to make decisions for themselves, which we can assure that in the state, that's how you will rebuild trust, because then everybody's got to be more transparent, and you need to and rebuild that. That's the only way I see to rebuild it, is to have transparency and let people make the individual choices they want.
Absolutely. I mean, if you have information and logic and common sense coming from government, then people can make decisions that it's a huge lie to look at someone and say you have no options. We raise our kids and we raise our kids to be able to see that you're never backed against a wall, that you have to be able to step away and survey what your options are. So there's growing bipartisan interest in improving not just this freedom for Americans, but also let's not just treat disease after the fact, after we get a diagnosis, but let's look at the foundation of what makes us healthy. So, what role do you see state government playing in creating healthier communities?
Well, so the most fundamental place that we can do that is in the schools, in the school system. So and we actually have some places that are. I've actually visited some of these schools. They're doing better. It's not exactly how I would do it necessarily, but they're getting some more whole food type of options. They're trying to go a little bit more local, a little bit less processed, and I think that's one of the things that you do. But I mean, again, we have tremendous front end problems. So I'll give you an example. The SNAP program, when you basically allow federal and state tax dollars to go in and fund all the kinds of, and I hate to single these out, but I'll single them out, like sugary sweet drinks or highly processed snack foods. Guess what? That you're laying the foundation for future health problems, which will cause our in the cost of care if that person were to remain on a social welfare footing. They're going to need more health care. We need to get better at communicating. You need to get kids out of the classroom all day and get them into some exercise routines, get them back there. How about getting rid of the vending machines that dot campuses and are filled with? We've got them all over DC too, all over the Congress. They're filled with every piece of highly processed food that's not good for you. I get it. We all take a break now and then, but the reality is, let's educate our kids and start working on that generation as well, and teach them and give them options. And where I've seen this put in place in Arizona has been highly successful, Leah. It's been very good, and the kids, I've talked to kids, they like it. I'll tell you one other thing that would be more healthful as well is you've got some states that are banning screens bell to bell, and that's where I would be. You ban the screens bell to bell, and let's get back, and that will be more healthy for the children as well. But that's really where I think you build it from that generation.
That is, I mean, it's super powerful to teach kids to even think about what's going into their mouth. And if we don't give them things that are nutritious and that are building their bodies, then they just grow up thinking it doesn't matter. And so it's just, and it's interesting whenever I hear from a mom that's like, Leah, what do I do? My kid is expressing A, B, or C symptom. You start with nutrition, cut the sugar
That's
immediately.
right.
So it's a powerful piece of knowledge that we can not only give to our kids, but show them how to exercise through their daily intake. So one of the things that I've really appreciated about your leadership is you don't seem to fear standing alone for the Constitution, when you're defending the Constitution. And I just want to hear from you. Has there ever been a moment where standing on the principles within our Constitution came at a cost, and was it worth it?
Yeah, I think that I could probably give you several moments, but I do remember a highly particularized moment where I was standing, and I had a few friends that were standing with me, but it was very few. And man, I'll tell you what happened is all the media came down on us. I'm a Republican, so Republican leadership from around the nation came down on me. I received countless calls from people who had donated significant amounts to my campaigns who said, I will never donate to you again. I mean, and I had death threats that were actually legitimate death threats that we had to watch out for. I still get death threats all the time, Leah, but those some of these were real, and so you just stand there and you do what you think you need to do because it's right.
I mean, when independent voters look at this race, when you're standing on principle, you can talk about more than just your party, right? And so you have independent voters looking at this race right now, many of whom, frankly, don't feel particularly safe with either party. So, what do you hope that these undecided or independent voters understand about your race for governor, about your plans for Arizona?
Well, while I some people would say I'm hyper partisan, but the reality is, it's also been said of me that I'm more likely to vote against my party than almost anybody else in Congress, and that's because I'm evaluating issues based on what I think is there, whether it's constitutional. Even if it's constitutional, do I think it's something that we should be doing, that the federal government should be doing? If they should be doing it, can we afford to do it? How are we going to pay for it? I try to take a real approach on what's the long term impacts, regardless of party. And I think my own party leadership would tell you how frustrated they can get with me sometimes because I will tell them I just can't go there with you. But also, I think people across the aisle. I mean, they'll tell you that maybe partisanship isn't my top goal, but if we find an issue that we have in common, I mean, I've got just three bills in the last month or so that have come out. Two of them unanimously, but three of them with bipartisan support that have gone over to the Senate. And it's not a matter of picking fights. It's a matter of picking points of agreement that you find and then going forward. I mean, I look back and Senator McCain, who he and I got along really well together. We passed legislation together to help. It was called the Ashland Mike Amber Alert and Indian Country Bill. We got that bill passed, and I believe it ended up being unanimously. And that bill alone has saved dozens of lives. And the right to try bill. I mean, all these bills that I was the lead on, where I built coalitions across the aisle, and that's sometimes you build coalitions across the aisle, trying to. It's a matter of the policy, not necessarily the politics. That's what I would say.
You said at the beginning that you're coming home to Arizona because you see the state going in the wrong direction. So, as governor, what would be your top three priorities to make those changes to help Arizona turn around?
Well, so Arizona under the current governor has gone bottom five for job growth, wage growth, and affordability. So, and that is that is the number one issue anybody ever talks to me about is how do we afford this stuff, you know? And so we go with affordability and affordability of housing. And the affordability of housing means that you don't put moratoriums on building houses in certain locations. You correct the problem instead of just stopping something. So that's the first thing is fix that, fix the housing cost, and we can do that through a series of policies that would actually fix the problem. Second thing is we have to get rid of some of our fraud, waste, and abuse. We're like every other state with 2.5. Lee, you're not going to believe this. $2.5 billion worth of fraud annually in our Medicaid program in Arizona. And that isn't coming from the Republican side. That's coming from the current Democrat attorney general who says that. You have to fix that. I mean, you can't, that's unsustainable. So I think we do that. Another one that I think people who care like you do and I do about health services, and then in the Indian, excuse me, health services program in Arizona, that estimate baseline is $2.8 billion worth of fraud, maybe as high as $8 billion of fraud. And what was happening there, without getting into too much detail, what was happening is people were setting up federally funded and state funded addiction clinics, but they weren't bringing patients in. And if they did bring patients in, they were not treating them. And if they weren't treating them, they would actually put them out on the streets and continue to receive payments for them. We had people, and some of these programs, our current governor just pulled the plug on it, even though there were good programs within that system that were actually treating people. The result was all those people were left out, and a number of people died because of that. So what I'm suggesting is we have to fix the fraud, but you have to do it in a way where you recognize that there are legitimate concerns and people that need to be cared for that are being cared for within the system. But I mean but literally people died. So we have to fix those two things there. And then I think the third thing that is a priority for us is to actually create what I call the system of freedom, or the recognition of freedom. And it's the healthcare freedom choice, health freedom. It's the educational freedom, and it's the freedom of movement that comes when you have good infrastructure. So those three things right there. And then there's subs off each one. Like if we talk affordability, we got to take care of the water issue in Arizona. We got to take care of the gas issue because we don't have any oil and gas in Arizona. So we depend on pipelines from California and Texas, and we actually, by doing that from California, we've got a bit of a problem, but we can open it up from Texas, and we do have another pipeline that's in the works. I was going to say another pipeline in the pipeline, yeah. So that's good too.
Absolutely. Well, there's voting getting underway in Arizona. It's a big year, 2026, for governor races, especially in your own state. Where can people go to learn more about your campaign and upcoming events to get involved?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's at bigsforarizona.com. And if you go there, you can do everything from donate to get on our list so that you know what's going on, and volunteer, and we'll let you know when events are coming up. But I really appreciate.
Absolutely. Well, no matter where you are, go to votehf.com to get your voter guide. And if you are in Arizona, Stand for Health Freedom endorses Congressman Andy Biggs for your next governor. So go grab your Arizona voter guide on votehf.com and make sure to cast your vote. Friends, the primaries are a secret weapon for the people's issues because we have to make sure that the right candidates are going to be on the November ballot. So we're not stuck between two candidates that we don't really want to see in office. So go to votehf.com and thank you, Congressman Biggs. We'll be in touch.